This is Sir Creep. Tonight I'm not here to show you anything. I want you to listen, turn the lights down, put your headphones on, and let my voice guide you through 3 true feeling stories about people who realized too late that the danger wasn't outside. It was right next to them. If these stories keep you listening till the end, show your support by liking the video. Subscribe for more unsettling stories. And if you've ever experienced something similar, leave a comment below. For the first 3 months after I moved into apartment 4B, I thought my neighbor was just strange. Not dangerous, not aggressive, just off in a way you can't quite explain. The building itself was old, one of those narrow brick apartments, tucked between newer developments, where the hallways smelled faintly of dust and cold metal, the kind of place where every sound carried, every footstep echoed, every door slam felt personal. I worked night shifts, so my sleep schedule was already broken. That's probably why I noticed him before anyone else did. Apartment 4C, the unit directly next to mine. Every night, without exception, his lights stayed on. Not just one room, all of them. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, bright white light pouring through the thin gap under his door, spilling into the hallway at 3, 4, sometimes 5 in the morning. At first I assumed he worked nights too. But then I started hearing the footsteps. Slow, careful, always pacing. Back and forth, never rushing, never stopping, like someone afraid to sit down. I never once heard a television, never music, never phone calls, just footsteps, and sometimes breathing. Heavy breathing, right against the wall we shared. The first time I actually saw him was in the laundry room. It was just after sunrise, around 6:30 a.m., when I was coming back from a shift. He was already there, standing perfectly still in front of one of the machines. Not loading it, not using it, just standing. He was tall, thin, too thin. The kind of thin that makes you wonder if someone has been eating properly. His skin looked pale under the fluorescent lights, almost gray. When he turned toward me, I noticed his eyes. Bloodshot, wide, unblinking, like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. "Morning," I said, mostly out of politeness. He stared at me for a second too long, then nodded once. Didn't smile, didn't speak. Just walked past me and disappeared down the hallway. That's when I noticed something else. He smelled wrong. Not bad, not like garbage or sweat, more like cold soil. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. The footsteps started earlier, sometimes around midnight, sometimes right after sunset, and they never stopped. No pauses, no rhythm, just constant movement. I tried knocking once, stood there with my hand raised, listening to his footsteps on the other side of the wall. I knocked. They stopped instantly, dead silence. I waited 30 seconds, a minute. Then I heard something else. Breathing, slow, controlled, right behind the door. I stepped back without thinking and returned to my apartment. That night I slept with the TV on. The dreams started shortly after. Every time I slept, I dreamed of standing in my hallway, staring at my own front door, knowing someone was breathing on the other side, knowing that if I opened it, I wouldn't see anyone, but something would step inside anyway. I started waking up exhausted, like I hadn't rested at all. Dark circles formed under my eyes. My appetite disappeared, and every night, the footsteps continued. One evening, the building lost power. The hallway lights cut out first, plunging everything into darkness. Emergency lights flickered weakly at the far end of the floor. I froze, because for the first time since I moved in, apartment 4C went quiet. No footsteps, no pacing, nothing. Minutes passed. Then I heard it. A soft knock. From inside my wall. Not on the door, on the wall. 3 taps. Slow, deliberate. I stood frozen in my living room, phone clenched in my hand. Then a whisper followed. Low, dry. "I can hear you breathing." I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I went to the building manager, an older woman named Mrs. Caldwell, who had worked there longer than anyone else. I asked about my neighbor. Apartment 4C. She frowned. "There is no one in 4C, she said. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She didn't laugh back. "That unit's been empty for over a year," she continued. "Tenant before you left suddenly." "Left how?" I asked. She hesitated. "Didn't take anything. Clothes still in the closet, food in the fridge, door unlocked." My stomach tightened. "Did he work nights?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "No," she said. "He stopped sleeping." That night I heard the footsteps again, but this time They were inside my apartment, not walking, crawling, slow nails dragging across the floor, circling my bed, breathing inches from my face. I kept my eyes closed, because I knew if I opened them, he would finally stop pacing. This story was sent to me by a woman named Clara, and she swears every word of it is true. Clara moved into apartment 4B of the old Roosevelt building in downtown Chicago in the fall of 2021. It was one of those historic buildings with thick walls, high ceilings, and that strange, permanent smell of dust and old wood. Her next-door neighbor in 4A was an elderly man named Mr. Alden. Quiet, polite, almost invisible. Clara would see him sometimes in the hallway, carrying groceries in a reusable bag, always wearing the same brown cardigan. He'd smile, nod, but never spoke. Clara assumed he was shy, or maybe hard of hearing. She didn't think much of it, until the knocking started. It began exactly 1 week after she moved in. 3 soft knocks. Tap, 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 coming from the shared wall with Mr. Alden's apartment. It happened at 11:07 p.m. every night, like clockwork. Clara thought maybe it was a pipe, or the building settling. But the rhythm was too deliberate, too human. After the 3rd night, she decided to mention it to Mr. Alden. She knocked on his door, no answer. She knocked again, nothing. But as she turned to leave, she heard it. The same 3 knocks. Tap, 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 coming from inside his apartment, right behind the door. Clara froze. A voice, old and raspy, whispered through the wood. Not yet. She never knocked on his door again. The knocks continued. Every night, 11:07 p.m. But then, new sounds started. Whispers, faint, frantic murmurs that seemed to travel through the walls. Clara couldn't make out words, but she could feel the urgency. She started sleeping with earplugs. It didn't help. The whispers weren't just sound. They were vibration. She could feel them in her bones. One night, driven by a mix of fear and frustration, she pressed a glass against the wall to listen better, and she heard it clearly. Not Mr. Alden's voice, a younger voice, a woman's voice, crying, "Let me out, please, he won't let me out." Clara dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, and from the other side of the wall, she heard 3 slow knocks in response. Tap, tap, tap. Clara went to the building superintendent, a tired man named Frank. She told him about the knocks, the whispers, the voice. Frank just sighed. "Lady, Mr. Alden's lived here for 30 years. He's a quiet man, doesn't bother nobody. But the sounds," Clara insisted. "Old building," Frank interrupted. "Pipes, mice, you'll get used to it." But Clara couldn't let it go. She started researching the building's history, and she found something. In 1992, a young woman named Elaine Moss disappeared. She lived in apartment 4A, Mr. Alden's apartment. The case was never solved. That's when the pattern changed. The knocks started coming during the day, and they weren't just on the shared wall anymore. They were in her bedroom wall, the bathroom wall, the ceiling. Once, while she was showering, 3 knocks came from inside the shower pipe. Tap, tap, tap. Steam filled the room, and on the foggy mirror, a handprint appeared. Small, delicate. A woman's hand. Clara started seeing Mr. Alden in the hallway more often. He'd be standing outside his door, staring at her door. Not moving, just staring. One time, she caught him placing his ear against her door. When he saw her, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone sharing a secret. Clara started spending nights at her friend's apartment. But the knocks followed her. Not physically, in her dreams. She'd dream of Mr. Alden's apartment, a small dark place filled with walls. Not normal walls, walls within walls. And inside them, people, trapped, whispering, knocking. She'd wake up to the sound of 3 knocks in her friend's apartment. But her friend heard nothing. Clara decided to move out. She gave her notice to Frank. That night, the knocks were louder than ever. Banging, pounding, and the whispers became screams. "Don't leave us in here!" Clara packed a bag and ran out of her apartment. In the hallway, Mr. Alden's door was open. Just a crack, and from inside, she heard a familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it was coming from multiple places at once. Walls, floor, ceiling, like the entire apartment was knocking. Clara never went back. She left everything behind. A month later, she got a call from Frank. Mr. Alden had died. Natural causes. When they cleared out his apartment, they found something. The walls were hollow. Not by accident. by design. Behind the plaster there were spaces, small coffin-sized spaces, and in one of them, they found a skeleton, female, wearing a faded dress, holding a rusted pipe in her hand. The medical examiner said she'd been there for decades, and in her hand, she was clutching a note, written in shaky handwriting. He put others in the walls. I can hear them knocking. I knock back so they know they're not alone. The police found 2 more skeletons in other walls. All women, all missing persons from the 80s and 90s. Mr. Alden had been hiding them in his walls for 30 years. But here's what still haunts Clara. Before she moved out, she took one last look at her own apartment wall, and she noticed something she'd never seen before. A slight discoloration, in the shape of a hand, pressing outward, and right in the center of the palm. A small, almost invisible crack, as if someone on the other side had been trying to push through. Clara lives in a new building now, a modern one, with thin walls, and sometimes, late at night, she hears her neighbors moving around, talking, living. But once, just once, she heard 3 soft knocks. Tap, 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 coming from her bedroom wall. And when she pressed her ear against it, she didn't hear whispers. She heard breathing, slow, steady, and on her side of the wall, the plaster was warm. David and Elena bought a house in a quiet suburb of Portland. The neighbor to the west was an old man named Arthur, quiet, polite, always tending to his garden. But in the exact center of Arthur's perfect backyard stood a door, not a shed door or a gate, a freestanding weathered green door inside a wooden frame. No walls around it, no purpose. When David first asked about it over the fence, Arthur's smile didn't reach his eyes. "My memory door," he said lightly. "I keep things behind it I'd rather forget." David laughed, thinking it was an old man's eccentricity. But Elena saw what David missed. Arthur never stepped into the yard after 5 p.m. He'd sometimes stand at his kitchen window, staring at the door for an hour, completely still. Their dog would run happily everywhere except near the fence line facing that door. There he'd stop, whine, and back away with his tail tucked. The sounds began a month later. A low rhythmic scraping, like something heavy being dragged across dirt. It started every night just past midnight and lasted exactly 7 minutes. David would peer out from his dark bedroom, but in the moonlight, the door was just a silent silhouette. David's curiosity became an obsession. He mounted a small wildlife camera in his own tree, pointed at Arthur's yard. For 3 nights, nothing. On the 4th, the motion sensor triggered at 1:17 a.m. The infrared footage was grainy but clear. The backyard door swung inward. Nothing walked out. Instead, a dark, shifting mass, shape, like oil on water, poured from the base of the door frame and seeped into the earth. 10 seconds later, the door swung shut. David showed Elena the video. She wanted to call the police. He deleted it, a cold dread in his gut telling him to erase the evidence. Arthur changed after that. No more tomatoes on the porch, no more waves. Now he just looked at David with an expression of profound sadness and fear. Then the knocking started in David's own basement. 3 heavy knocks on the foundation wall they shared with Arthur's property. Every evening at dusk, David would run down, find nothing, but the air would be freezing and smell of damp soil. The final straw was a birthday barbecue photo. A friend took a group picture in their yard. That night, scrolling through the photos, David's blood went cold. In the background, visible in the small window of Arthur's green door, was a face. Pale, blurred, but unmistakably there, pressed against the glass. It was not Arthur. David marched next door, phone in hand. Arthur answered before he knocked. He looked decades older. "You looked," Arthur whispered, voice cracking. "I asked you not to look." David thrust the phone forward. "What is in your yard, Arthur?" Tears welled in the old man's eyes. "It's not in the yard. The yard is in it. The door is a lock. I'm the key that's breaking." He grabbed David's arm, his grip shockingly strong. "It's waking up. It knows your curiosity. It feeds on attention. You have to leave tonight." David refused. He called Arthur confused, sick. That night he woke at 3 a.m. to a deep, subaudible hum that vibrated in his teeth and the strong odor of freshly turned earth. The backyard door was wide open. The space behind it wasn't Arthur's yard. It was an absolute lightless void. Arthur stood in his own yard facing the open door. He took one step, then another toward that impossible darkness. He turned, looked directly at David's window, and mouthed 2 words. "I'm sorry." Then he stepped through. The door didn't slam. It swung gently, slowly, shut. In the final instant before it closed, David saw the other side of the door was an old clouded mirror. Reflected in it was not the yard, but a long, dark hallway stretching into infinity, lined with countless other doors. Arthur vanished. The police found his house empty, dustier than it should have been. They opened the backyard door. On the other side was just grass, a bird feeder, a garden. David and Elena moved within the month. The new family, the Wagners, moved in. They had 2 kids, a dog, a trampoline. David drove past once. The kids played, the dog sunned itself, right next to the green door. He almost convinced himself it was all a stress-induced nightmare. Until last week, a real estate alert popped up. His old house was for sale. The Wagners were moving after only 8 months. Unexpected relocation, the listing said. David called his old realtor. The woman's voice was hushed. "The little boy," she said. He started sleepwalking. Every night he goes to his window, points at the neighbor's yard, and says the same thing. The man in the door is lonely. He wants me to come play in the long hallway. David now lives in a new house with no strange doors in any yard. But just last night, taking out the trash in the quiet dusk, he heard it from the line of trees behind his new property. The distinct, gentle creak of a heavy wooden door opening, then the soft, solid sound of it clicking shut.